come here just for the arts. They come here for the hiking, for the sports, and things of that sort. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of things artistic going on here, and the purpose of this show is to help people know what those things are, to help people see these little secrets that we have around here. Now, we've had people like actors, we've had playwrights on, we've had the administrators of places like the Kayenta Center for the Performing Arts. We've also had Kathy Cecilwitz, who is the curator of the Sears Gallery here on the Dixie State campus, and we're looking to have even a greater variety of people coming on the show. We're going to have some ceramics artists and also some painters as well. We're also going to try and keep you informed of some of the local festivals and things of that sort that are happening around, things that you can participate in, as well as some museum pieces. We're also going to go as far north as Cedar City, talking about the Utah Shakespeare Festival, as well as the Cedar City Junior Ballet, as well as a bunch of other offerings. So this is all about making sure that these little artistic secrets that we have in town are not artistic secrets, but instead are part of the reason why people come here. Now, I do want to welcome my two guests. Just a little bit of introduction for them. First of all, we've got Rob Matheson. Now, I could call you Robert, I could call you Robbie, I could call you Rob. Do you have a preference?
I usually go by Robbie.
Gotcha. Robbie. Okay. Yeah. Well, Robbie, I'm going to read a little bit of your bio here so our listeners get a chance to get to know you. It says you do perform solo works for the double bass and the computer. As well, you work with something called the fluid interaction between acoustic and electroacoustic music.
Yeah.
We'll certainly be getting into that to hopefully explain that to those who are listening. And just a little bit about your educational background. You've got a doctorate of musical arts, and that's in bass performance from the University of Arizona. So you are no stranger to desert living, as we should say. And also, you've performed with a lot of ensembles in many, many musical genres. There's an ensemble called the Ironwood Duo, Portable Masterpieces, as well as the Tucson Chamber Orchestra. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Fantastic. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And Glenn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
Can you hear me?
We absolutely can. Please do speak into your phone as much as you can, a little more than you think you should. Glenn, thank you so much for agreeing to join us here on the show. You're also somebody who is very, very influential in the music of Southern Utah, and I'm thrilled that you're going to be here to discuss with us a little bit about your background. And by the way, both Robbie and Glenn, if I say anything that you would rather not be put into your bio, let me know. But I have to tell you, both of these are actually pretty impressive. Glenn, your educational background, you have a Bachelor of Music Education from Weber State University and a Master of Music in Percussion Performance from the University of Utah. So you've been around northern Utah, certainly. And also you have a DMA in Percussion Performance at UNLV, is that correct?
That is correct.
Tremendous. And you've also been performing at the Tuacahn Center for the Arts. How many years now?
Since 2009.
Since 2009.
So that'd be eight years, I guess.
Got it.
9.
You're one of the old timers at Tuacahn.
Yes, but I'm not on the program for my math skills.
Right. That's I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of artists like that on our show. I've only just I can't really claim to be good at math and things of that sort. I've only just mastered which buttons to push in order to make this show actually happen. So this is my foray into technology. I'm not even going to attempt math. I think Rob's the one that we're going to have to defer to when it comes to technology and things of that sort. Continuing on with your resume here, you've been a solo percussionist with the Utah Arts Festival Chamber Ensemble. And am I correct that you premiere new works all the time?
Every year I seem to premiere a few new works, yes, and it's gratifying to do so.
Fantastic. And this is actually a very sloppy segue of something that's going to come up later, the Grand Circle New Music Festival, which I'm very excited to hear about and talk about. It also says here you're a member of the Canyonlands New Music Ensemble and principal percussion with the Utah Chamber Ensemble and Ballet West. Let's see.
Formerly with Ballet West and the Utah Chamber Ensemble. I've had to give that up since moving to St. George.
Got it. So I'm going to add emeritus to those things that I just said. And I do apologize. I was all over the internet trying to find as much out about both of you as I possibly could. Only slightly creepy when it comes down to it. I'm getting better at pulling up information. And
I'm getting accustomed to people Googling me as well.
Yeah.
I imagine you are, my friend. I imagine you are. Moving on, though, as we move on to music and such, something that is certainly prevalent in your bios that I've seen so far, you are recognized as a Sabian cymbal musician.
Sabian Cymbal Company, I'm an endorsed artist of them, yes.
And what does that mean, to be an endorsed artist?
Well, not one of the big times, like, if you were playing for Bruno Mars or something, you would get all of your equipment for free by endorsing their product. But I do have an artist agreement where I receive some support from them on occasion.
Got it. Well, I know a lot of people out there who know Bruno Mars. I'm happy to say that I know Glenn Webb and Rob Matheson, and they can eat it when it comes to... Can I say that over the radio? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I promise to let the two of you talk. One of the things that I do to open the show, however, is I try to give an example of why this particular interview or this particular conversation is going to be important to me, or what the significance is for me. And I want to look at the questions of what do we know about music, what do we assume about music. And Glenn, I'm actually going to quote you from a few years ago. A lot of people know that I am in the theater side of things, and we've worked together on collaboration, certainly here at Dixie, but talking about a lot of ideas between music and theater. And you said something a few years ago about how you know just enough about theater to be dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I can put myself in that category as far as music is concerned. I know just enough to not only be dangerous, but be annoying to my music friends. And a little bit of my history, I've mentioned before that my brother was a concert pianist, and my grandfather, who actually got me into the arts, the theater and music and all sorts of things, he wanted to be a concert pianist but was unable to. And he instead became a church organist, and he was a church organist for hire. And every Sunday I went to a different denomination, sometimes not even Christian denominations, in order to hear him play. And that really opened up an appreciation of music for myself, to the point where I wanted to emulate my brother and my grandfather. So I tried playing the piano and never quite matched my brother. And he's actually... I have to brag about him. He's done very, very well for himself. He has played all over the world. He is one of the American artistic ambassadors to China, and he also has played with pretty much every major symphony you can name. I'm not envious at all of my brother. He's got a fantastic life. I remember when I was 13, he actually played Rhapsody in Blue with the National Symphony, and I thought that was really cool until I was there being the little brother slinking in the background. I was kind of like the Shakespearean villain, plotting the downfall of my brother who had made it. And all of this time, I was trying to be trained for music. I was trying to understand it. And I went through trying to play the piano very badly. I was able to make things sound like melodies, but I certainly wouldn't call myself a pianist. I went on to the trumpet just to annoy my family, I have to admit. The piano wasn't quite loud enough. And then I tried the violin, I got into the marching band and was a drum major and such. I took harmony analysis and composition. And it may sound... I'm trying to sound impressive with my musical training, but what I came to realize is I wasn't very innovative with music. I knew the standards. I knew Mozart, and I knew a lot of the popular music of the day, but especially now that I'm older and looking back on my musical training and also the music exposure that I had, I was actually very limited as to what is music. And that's something that I'm very interested in hearing from both of you today. Glenn, you're known as a percussionist. And I have to say, when I hear that, I think of my friends who were on that drum set, and I have very little imagination as to everything that encompasses. And Robbie, you do electronic music and acoustic music and such. And I think to myself, well, that's not Beethoven. So
it's not.
Let's find out what it is you two do. So here you are as musicians. Robbie, to start with you. We actually have offices that are right next to each other, and sometimes I do hear things coming out of there that I'm wondering, is that just computer feedback or what's happening over there?
Is that a mistake, or do I need to check on him?
Exactly. Yeah. So, Robbie, what do you do in there?
I think what you're referring to right there, sometimes I'll be experimenting with new pieces, and so you'll hear that coming through the wall, just like just like I'll hear you working with your students on the other side, and I'll hear shouting and screaming sometimes too. But
Is that me as a frustrated teacher, actor, or my
I
students?
think
I don't
you're
know.
just running through lines. I think that's what's going on. But yeah. So as far as you asked the question as far as even what is music, and in a lot of contemporary music, it's defined as organized sound. So when you say, well, that's not Beethoven, it's not, but Beethoven was organizing sound in the way that music or sounds were expected to be organized in that time. And today we have a new vocabulary that's been developed over 150 years since then. That's developed a new way of organizing sounds, still using pitch, oftentimes, not always. Sometimes using harmony. Much more emphasis put on timbre, so sound quality, and on time. So I see a lot of contemporary music and what I do with electroacoustic music, meaning music that where the acoustic aspects of it, the sound comes from electronics or is manipulated or changed by electronics. That adds a lot more emphasis to the timbral side of things. So that's those strange sounds that you're hearing through the wall. That's me manipulating timbre.
Well, I have to tell you, you say strange sounds, and I've become very intrigued by how those sounds really are music, and that's coming from, of course, my ignorant point of view. Glenn, regarding percussion, you mentioned earlier that you weren't here or you weren't at Tuacahn for your math skills. I have to tell you, again, this comes from my limited understanding of percussion and how that works, but I would think you'd have to be a fantastic mathematician to, just as Robbie is finding new sounds to play with or new definitions of sounds to play with, I guess would be it there. I used to think that a percussion, of course, was just a certain kind of drum. And by the way, Glenn, I will let you talk in just a minute. I'm just so excited to have both of you here. I remember this was 10 years ago, the first time I ever saw you perform or conduct a jazz ensemble. I've never seen a cooler cat in my life. You were up there, you had your sleeves rolled up, you weren't standing there like a regular, or what I assumed would be a regular conductor of an ensemble. You were walking around, you were helping your instrumentalists, adjust their instruments and such. And what that said to me is that I really don't know what goes on in percussion at all. Let me ask you, do you have a particular type of percussion that you specialize in, or are you just an explorer of all types?
I do have some areas that I specialize in, but I think part of my value as a musician is my breadth. I grew up, I thought I was going to be a jazz drummer as a teenager. That was my niche, but it didn't work out. I didn't pursue it as I became aware of other kinds of music and possibilities in music. And then, you study different instruments and you move on to others at times. So the vibraphone, the jazz vibraphone is sort of my specialty, but I have a blast as an orchestral musician, as a chamber musician, a soloist, playing different things. I've gotten into a lot of Arabic drumming recently and enjoy all of it.
That's what I love about artists. I mean, you just said, yeah, I got into Arabic drumming. I think that's just fun to hear. An African rain stick. How do you play that in an orchestra?
He is one of the premier reek players in southern Utah.
Reek players? I don't even know what that is. What is that?
A reek is the Arabian tambourine.
Oh, of course.
So
absolutely.
The tambourine that we typically picture in our mind is the European version. But it grows out from the North African and Middle Eastern hand drumming tradition. So it's a slightly different style of tambourine.
Got it. I'll tell you, that's one of the things I really love about having people on this show is learning these things. Again, hey, a snare drum, that's my about my limit. And I understand there's a bass drum out there, too.
Yep.
Now, with this, there's so many fun things for you to play. Do you have a preference? You said you do a lot of orchestral work and such, which I'm assuming is very metered, if you will, or very controlled. I've also watched you improvise a lot. Do you have a preference?
I have said a couple of times that my preference is whatever I'm doing at the time, whatever the world requires of me, to be a jazz drummer, to be an Arabic drummer, to be a classical timpanist. I try to live in the moment, I guess, and whichever I'm doing is probably my favorite at that time.
That's really wonderful. I'd say I have yet to be surprised by watching you do, or to not be surprised by watching you put together a concert or a program. And I think that's actually very admirable for an artist, not only here, but all around. Now, we're talking about all of these different kinds of percussion instruments. I never dreamt that I would go to a concert and watch somebody behind a computer make sounds, make music for me. Robbie, you are an accomplished bass player.
Yeah, most of my my studies and most of my professional career has been behind a bass. I got involved with making music with computers. Well, first, actually, in my undergrad at Cal State Long Beach, I started working in the electronic music studio there a little bit. And then when I was in grad school at the University of Arizona, I started working with composing electronic pieces from a computer and creating fixed media works, that means like in the concert setting, there's speakers on the stage, you press play, and everybody just looks at an empty stage and listens to the music. And I loved the sounds that I was hearing from that, but what was missing was the live performance aspect of it. And that's, as a performer, I felt like almost like I was working my way out of a gig by doing that. And in addition to that, just feeling like I'm taking away the aspect of music that I enjoy so much, which is the live performance, that, the audience on the edge of their seat and thinking like, what's going to happen next? Are they going to make it through this next passage? Even the tension of that. And just the chance of having a person on stage making sound in real time. That there's that question as to how it's going to turn out. It'll always be a little bit different each time. And so I started working on how to interface the double bass, which is my instrument, with the computer. And so I started working with that and developed a pickup system that converts what I'm playing on the bass into what's called MIDI code, a musical instrument digital interface. And that way I can control all the electronic sounds from my double bass. Another thing that came to mind when you were asking that is the first time I saw a group of musicians playing on stage with nothing but laptops, my wife and I looked to each other, and my thought that I was having at the time, and I think she was thinking it too, it was years ago, but the idea was like, I wonder what they're actually doing back there.
Playing solitaire.
Exactly. Like they have they have an internet-based game going on between all four of them, or they're just checking their email or something. So adding that live performance aspect of it, where there's a visual connection between the performers and the audience, I think is very important.
Well, I'll tell you what that reminded me of, and please know, I'm an actor. I love the sound of my own voice. I just do digressions all over the place. What that absolutely reminded me of wondering what's going on in the mind of those performers up there. I went to an amusement park called King's Dominion in Virginia, where I grew up, and this was in Richmond, Virginia. And, of course, they have these small brass ensembles that are performing all over the park, and sometimes they will find a performance space, and they'll sit down behind the music stands. And I was listening to a concert. It was Disney and things of that sort that were popular melodies. But I was intrigued by the trombone player because all we could see was the back of the stand. And he was flipping the pages differently than anybody else up there. And I thought, wow, he's an interesting mind. As I mentioned earlier, Glenn, the first time I saw you, I thought you were a really cool cat. This guy looked like a really cool cat. And I was trying to figure out what he was doing. And he wasn't even seeming to move the page where phrases would end or things of that sort. So after the concert, I went over and looked at what was on his stand, and he was reading Time magazine while he was performing. He just knew the show so well. I have no idea why that popped into my head, but I thought I would share that with you. And Glenn, you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. I want to make sure we don't ignore you because, of course, I'm not looking right at you here.
Okay.
As we move, I'm just going to keep checking in occasionally, and you're more than welcome to pipe in. If you can get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, at some point I will find something magical to add.
You know, something that Glenn, when he was with him sharing his story, we both, it's interesting to think about that. And we both had a similar beginning too. I started out playing first bass guitar, not reading music, playing in garage bands with friends. And what made me really fall in love with the double bass was hearing jazz musicians, hearing Charles Mingus and Ray Brown playing and thinking, I need to sound like these guys and I can't get that on an electric bass. So that was my goal initially, was I'm just going to be a jazz player. And I didn't even touch the bow for the first couple of years that I played. And then as I went off to school and started studying with my first kind of classical bass professor, and he introduced me to the bow, I realized, wow, I can get so many different sounds out of this bass than just plucking it and letting it decay. So with the bow, that's what really helped me fall in love with the double bass and those sounds, is that I can pull out of it more. I can pull out the standard tone, but then I can manipulate the timbre of the bass and make it sound in some ways more interesting to me and more expressive.
Well, that's Glenn. I don't mean to creep you out at all, building on something that Rob said here. But one of my favorite things to do when I would be in the Performing Arts Building, where we shared a lot of space, would be to walk around and to just hear different ensembles playing, hear different musicians practicing and such. And there were a few occasions where you would be working in the band room, and I would hear either the vibraphone or any other kind of percussion instrument. And it was always fascinating to watch you. Again, I do not mean to creep you out with this.
No.
But it was always fascinating to watch you and watch you teach other artists to experiment with the instrument. A lot of people, I think, would be misinformed, as I was, that percussion was about just hitting something. But to watch you finesse these instruments and such was really, really inspiring. Now, Rob,
the physical aspect of percussion is one of its strengths, I think.
and again, I mentioned last interview, I can't remember how it came up, but one of the ways I like to irritate my brother as a concert pianist was to tell him that the piano was indeed a percussion instrument, and we would have an argument due to the hammers hitting the strings. But Glenn, it always was inspirational to watch you do this. Now, Rob mentioned some of his inspirations, if you will. Glenn, how did you get into percussion? What were some of the musicians that really drove you and influenced your work?
Oh, most of them. I know that
Any sound.
as a young man, young boy, probably 12 or 13, my teacher said we were playing along with a few records to imitate the styles of the greats. And he said, you need to get Helen Reddy's greatest hits. And I had no idea who Helen Reddy was and who her drummer might be. So I got the album, or the LP, and put it on and started to listen. And, well, this first song had some drums in it, but it's nothing wonderful. And the next one, and it went on, and it was impressive drumming, but standard. And I got back to the lesson with him, and I said, what? I didn't hear any drum solos in any of this. He said, yeah, but you heard the drums doing exactly what they should be doing, supporting the music in these different ways. So it was opened up to me that music does this, the drumming serves the music, and, you know, it's not all about the flash and the extensive drum solos and different things. So that sort of helped to mold some of my mindset about part of my role as a musician, as a percussionist in different musical settings, serve the music.
I've had the pleasure of actually hearing some percussion concerts. And, okay, now I'm going to qualify this by saying there is one instrument I refuse to go to any more concerts for, and that is the pipe organ. I love the pipe organ. I love it in a church setting, but I went to a concert once really excited, and I got tired of it very quickly. In my ignorance, I thought the same thing would happen in a percussion concert, and that was far, far from reality.
Yeah, I've made comments about some of my peer instruments. Like you watch a clarinet or a saxophone, they're barely moving their fingers. You see them up there doing it, and a pianist or an organist, they're often hidden a bit by the instrument, and you know they're doing more than you're able to see. But with the percussion, it's always such a visual and physical element that's added to the instrument that I enjoy.
Yeah, I enjoy watching rock drummers throw their sticks and things of that sort. And gosh, who was the group that they actually put their drummer in a cage that was suspended above the audience and flipped him upside down while he played the drums? You know, cheap little tricks.
I think it might have been Van Halen or Tommy Lee. Who was Tommy Lee playing for? I don't recall. One of the 80s hair bands, we'll say.
Right, the 80s, and I'll tell you, this is just a personal story. Looking at those, I used to think they were the coolest thing, and those guys were tough. And if you go back and look at their videos, my gosh, they were saps, just saps with big hair. But that's a totally different show there. Rob, you've been trying to talk for a while now, and I keep cutting you off.
When he was talking about Helen Reddy, I just wanted to ask, was that Hal Blaine playing on that recording?
Probably. I don't remember now, but I bet Hal Blaine was involved in it, yep.
Now, with this, we've talked a little bit about our own specialties and the things that we do. I want to shift this conversation just a little bit, and I'm actually going to use a piece of media to do this. And I also have an original composition here that Rob Matheson has put together electronically. But first, I want to play a piece of media from a movie that I find absolutely inspirational, not only from the acting perspective, but also from a musical perspective. And this movie is Amadeus by Peter Sheffer. Have the two of you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Actually, it's what I really appreciate about it is you see the works of Mozart being appreciated sometimes from an envious perspective, but the innovation of it really being commented on. And the scene I'm about to play for you, it's about a little over a minute long. And this is Salieri describing the music that he's hearing for the first time from Mozart and his reaction to it. And I'd like to steer our conversation towards new music, new ways of listening to music and hearing music, and ultimately writing music. So we'll be right back after this clip from Amadeus.
On the page it looked nothing. The beginning simple, almost comic. Just a pulse, bassoons, basset horns, like a rusty squeeze box. And then, suddenly, high above it, an oboe. A single note hanging there, unwavering. Until a clarinet took it over. Sweetened it into a phrase of such delight. This was no composition by a performing monkey. Yes, it was a music I've never heard. Filled with such longing, such unfulfillable longing. It seemed to me that I was hearing the voice of God. On the page.
All right, that was a portion of the music where Salieri was hearing Mozart for the first time for this particular Mozart piece. And the attitude that I bring to that, or that I remember having, was, well, of course, music has always been like that. It's been beautiful. It's having an unwavering note in the air. There was nothing new about that whatsoever. Now, from a theatrical perspective, I'm very familiar with innovations that were had very simply from the past, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, and even before them. This is just a little theater history lesson before we get into music and the creation of new. It started with what were called dithyrambs, and dithyrambs were these songs that all shepherds knew, so they would get together and they would recite them together. I refer to them as the old ancient Greek Irish pub songs, where everybody knows them and they all sing them together while they're getting drunk. Well, you would have these dithyrambs, and then that kind of transformed into a dramatic telling of a poem, an epic poem where everybody would be speaking together. And then there was this gentleman, and I use that term loosely. Anybody who knows artists throughout history, you may know this is a little sketchy to say, but a gentleman who, instead of speaking with everyone else, he took a few steps away from the group. And all of a sudden, you had the group speaking something, and he could respond. And of course, today we think, well, of course, that's how theater works. That's a script. But it was amazing how innovative that actually was. and how shocking that must have been to the audience. Now, just as I've been shocked by the finesse that's necessary for percussion and what's possible with percussion, the two of you have put together something called the Grand Circle New Music Festival. Do I have the title right on that?
Well,
Not
we
festival.
have. I don't think we've used the term festival, although it's the Grand Circle New Music. We consider it kind of a rotating group of musicians that we invite to perform with us on several times a year. So I guess it could be a festival, but I haven't
Or a
used that
presenting
term
organization. Yeah.
before.
Got it. I think it's exciting because, of course, you are doing new works. My brother started to record works, and by the way, when I came into the studio today, I thought, or I knew this was going to be a great show, because one of my favorite things to hear my brother play was Rachmaninoff's first concerto in F sharp, and I came in to hear this piece, and I thought, yes, this is inspiring me. Okay, that was one of those digressions I was talking about, but with new music, it would be easy for people to assume that you just write like Mozart, that you just write like even more contemporary composers. Let's get contemporary like Stravinsky. I'm aging myself in that I consider him contemporary. But what kind of music are you looking for? What kind of music are you doing?
Well, we have a couple of principles that help us guide and select music. It's new music, so what defines new? How far do we go back? Is it just 21st century? But we kind of look at about 50 years back, that there has to be often some time passed to see will the music endure, or are they the musical attempts just processes that we go through to find things that do endure a little better. That and being the Grand Circle, it's that's sort of a marketing for tourism idea, but it relates to the desert Southwest, essentially some of the reaching into the Four Corners area, into down into Arizona and up through St. George and the national parks that we have here. So that's we seek some music that's been written in or about the Grand Circle region.
So we've been seeking out composers that are either from this area or have written, like you said, music that's inspired by it.
Well, and you say you look at music from about the past 50 years. Do you commission new works? Do you work on new works that have never been performed before?
We haven't commissioned any new work specifically for our organization yet, but we've put out a call for works and received compositions from composers. The concert that's coming up next Thursday is we have 3 pieces by Grand Circle region composers. One composition professor from Northern Arizona University, from NAU, we're performing one of his pieces. We're playing another piece by a doctoral candidate in composition from the University of Utah, and then I've got one of my pieces on the program as well.
Fantastic. And you've mentioned and Glenn, you mentioned that it was a core group. Who do you play with, and how did you guys get together?
We met at Dixie State essentially as Robbie and I got to know one another and realized that we share a similar passion and vision for music and new music. So we decided, beyond the occasional thing, let's form something that's a little bit more permanent, and that we can, just build a following, build a group. So many of the faculty, many of the performers come from the Dixie State Music Department faculty or the SUU Music Department faculty, and a few other fine musicians in the area join us.
Got it.
Yeah, this next concert we have, I was just looking at how many players we have. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 13 musicians playing on this concert next Thursday.
And by the way, here's that opportunity for math to come in handy for us artists.
I can count to 13. And we've got, some, like Glenn said, some of them are faculty at DSU. Some of them are faculty members from SUU. We've got teachers from the area that teach high school orchestra and music classes that are also wonderful musicians that we work together with in other projects. And, you know, if we come up with a piece that we want to perform that calls for a specific instrumentation, we call out to our colleagues that we know that would be interested in that and can fill that spot.
Got it. Now, I feel a little bit like that annoying little brother. We mentioned earlier I know just enough about music to be dangerous. I'm going to ask you some real simple questions on this. What kind of music can the audience expect to hear? Does it lean towards electronic? Does it lean towards solo percussion? What kind of music are we looking at?
We have a pretty varied repertoire for Grand Circle. And that's something that I think we've kind of consciously done, is that it's not entirely experimental music. It's not all atonal. We have lots of music that's a little more conservative as far as being more accessible harmonically and pitch-wise. But then we also do throw in more experimental works as well to kind of introduce our audience to that, for one, but also because this is all the music that we enjoy playing.
You may have mentioned this earlier, but do you, especially you, Glenn, and you, Robbie, do you have compositions that you've submitted and worked on?
Well, Robbie, you speak to that.
Yeah, I have pieces that I've had compositions that we've played in Grand Circle that I've written specifically for that concert. I also have pieces that I've performed previously and thought, like for this next concert, I've got a piece for classical guitar and double bass that's called Box Canyon. And I've performed and recorded that before with a duo partner that I had when I was in grad school in Tucson. And I've been wanting to play more guitar pieces with Dave Anderson, who teaches guitar over at Tuacahn High School. And so I got the part to him and said, hey, how'd you like to play this on our next concert? And we actually just had a rehearsal for it this morning, and it went great.
Well, I'm glad you made that little segue there. You did exactly what I was hoping you would do. We actually have Box Canyon here on the computer, and I'd like to play that for our audience so they can get an opportunity to hear some of your original work. Are you all right with that?
That'd be great.
Tremendous. Here is Box Canyon by Rob Matheson. and that was a portion of Box Canyon. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get through the entire composition, but something I found interesting about a conversation Robbie and I were just having, that was improvised. Am I correct?
That one has improvisational sections in it. So there's a composed form and a composed melody, but then there's the guitar has an improvised section in there where I just play a looped section through it while the guitarist improvises. And then there's a section where the guitarist, I just have it written in the score to play body percussion on the body of the instrument, and I improvise over that.
Got it. And I do the same thing. Give me an instrument and I hit record. And yeah, maybe you've heard my stuff, or I don't know, people like Bruno Mars. Have you heard of him? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's actually incredibly impressive. Now, we also have another recording here. Glenn, this might be a surprise to you. Are you ready for this, Glenn?
Well, I'm ready.
No, this is actually a piece that Robbie just introduced me to. This is the both of you performing. Let's see, and this is a piece called Duet. Am I correct on that? Or is it just listed as Duet?
It's just listed as Duet, because this one is fully improvised.
Got it. I'm going to play a portion of this. And Glenn, are you all right with this? I can't tell if that's resigned in your voice. Or okay.
No, that's just a surprise is all. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to actually play just a portion of this. I'm sorry we can't play the entire thing, but to give you an idea of both Rob Matheson and Glenn Webb playing together. So here is what I'm affectionately now calling titled Duet. And I'm very sorry to have to fade that out. I'm having a great time listening to it. This really brings to light something we were talking about earlier, something that Rob just brought up, the different timbres that are possible from instruments and such. Glenn, does that bring any good memories to you hearing that?
Yeah, it does. I remember when we recorded that in the rehearsal room there. And the idea of timbre is can be such an innovator. Going back to your Amadeus example, he addresses the simplicity and the pulse, and then out of nowhere, a long-held oboe note, and then the clarinet takes over, and it develops it into a phrase. And at that time, in Mozart's time, the clarinet was just maturing as an instrument, being accepted into the orchestral setting. So that in Salieri is seeing Mozart's use of that as quite an innovation to the benefit of the music and the listener there.
Gotcha. Well, I'm very much hoping that, I could speak English. I'm an actor. You got to give me a script. I'm very much hoping, I cannot stop saying it. I'm very much hoping that the kind of work that you two do together and also on your own, and instrumentalists and composers all over, continues, and that this kind of music isn't a surprise, as it was to me when I first started hearing the work happening through the wall in the office on the other side, and also as I was creepily stalking the building to hear different kinds of work. Now, nobody in that building now is ever going to feel safe knowing that I stalk around there. Now, unfortunately, we have run out of time for this particular show. I hope both of you will agree to come back. Is that something I can persuade you two to do?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Tremendous. Now, one of the things that we have been trying to do is promote as many artistic possibilities and artistic events as we possibly can. A group that we have not been able to get someone on due to scheduling for yet is the Southwest Symphony Orchestra. And I do want to just throw out a quick plug. They are going to be presenting a Masterworks concert tomorrow night, Friday evening, featuring works by Beethoven and Brahms. And that's tomorrow night, Friday, April 27th. And it's going to be in the Cox Performing Arts Center on the campus of DSU. It starts at 7:30 p.m. And there are many different ranges of tickets that you can buy. You can get tickets anywhere from $12 to $24. They also have a family pass special, which they'll apply to a group of 4 to 8 tickets. Now, if you are interested in attending this concert, to hear Beethoven and Brahms, a little more traditional than what we may have just heard, though I have to say I'm going to, after the show, go and listen to the rest of these recordings. If you're interested, please give the box office a call at 435-652-7800, or visit the DSU Ticket website, which is DSUTix. That's DSUTIX.com. Just for some information's sake, the Symphony is partnering with the Utah Food Bank for this particular concert, and they're saying that they want to nourish not only the artistic needs, but also the human bodily needs, and art and reality. Well, that's a bad way to put it. Art and the logistical needs that our bodies have can certainly be complementary. So please do take advantage of this opportunity to hear some wonderful music performed by the Southwest Symphony Orchestra, and also to help out. 100% of the proceeds will go to the Utah Food Bank. Glenn and Rob, I cannot thank you enough for being here on this show. I look forward to continuing the conversation. And Glenn, I hope to see a lot more of you around here. So,
yeah, thank you. Just a reminder, our concert, Grand Circle New Music, is next Thursday at the Electric Theater at 7:30, and there is no admission charge to it.
Fantastic. I think that's wonderful to present new work and to allow people to just experience it. So thank you very much, and I will talk to you both later, and I hope to see everyone else, all 6 of our listeners. I'm kidding on that. I have no idea who listens to the show. I hope we have quite a good turnout. But I do hope that we see you everywhere as you're thinking on the arts.
St. George Radio at 100.3 FM, KDXI St. George.